Okay guys, today I'm going to be covering training intensity, an incredibly important topic, and this will apply to absolutely everyone on the program. When I'm talking about training intensity here, I'm referring to bodybuilding and strength training, not endurance training. The intensity guidelines for endurance training are different, and obviously you will be given personalized guidelines based on kind of what you're personally working towards if you are incorporating endurance training into routine. Absolutely everyone on the program strength trains, not quite everyone does endurance training, so this is so important for everyone. Essentially, training intensity refers to how hard you are actually training day to day in the gym, how much effort you're putting in. It goes without saying it's a key determinant of progress, that it really is going to drive change. And obviously you will have hopefully watched the other training video on progressive overload, but essentially with training intensity you are consistently applying effort and overload and forcing a change. Like, you can't expect your body to change. For example, you can't expect your muscles to grow and become more defined if you don't apply overload to force that physical change. If everything else is on point and you're not seeing a physical change, so if your sleep protocols are on point, quality and quantity, if your recovery is good, if your nutrition is on point, if you're not quite seeing the results that you would like, I would always look at the training intensity. Like, are you actually training hard enough in the gym? And I think a lot of people are just uneducated to the fact that they don't quite understand how hard we should be pushing. Now, I do question when a lot of people say that everything's fine, I just need help with my training. Usually these people aren't actually fueling properly, they aren't eating the good quality whole foods that you need to in order to promote good performance in the gym. But obviously we will give you guidelines on all of this as well. So check yourself, make sure you are training hard enough. Now, it's all well and good me saying that, but how do we actually measure training intensity? So everyone on the program, I think bar none, we give guidelines for intensity in terms of RPE. So that stands for the rate of perceived exertion. When you signed up to the program, you will have received an onboarding document where this was defined and explained in there, but I've just ripped that from there and put it in here as well. So essentially, the scale of RPE, it's assessing your difficulty and intensity of your training on a scale of 1 to 10. So it's quite simple. RPE 10 would be absolute max effort, like complete failure. For example, if you were doing a bench press with a barbell, you would not be able to do another rep. That bar would be on your chest and you'd be unable to move it. You couldn't possibly do another rep. RPE 9, obviously on the high end of the spectrum, depends on the individual and the actual exercise that we're talking about, but generally it would usually be equivalent to 1 to 2 reps away from failure. And RPE 8, which most of you, we recommend that most of you lift to an RPE 8, actually means 2 to 3 reps away from failure and so on. Now, a lot of you watching this might be thinking, oh well, 2 or 3 reps away from failure, that's not that hard. There's not many people have actually experienced true failure. Even if you think you've been close to failure, you probably haven't been, especially on free weight barbell movements and dumbbell movements. It's quite hard to take yourself to failure. It's a lot easier to take yourself to failure and more safely to do so on machines. But we would never recommend that anyone goes to failure on the barbell stuff that we've got in their program, unless it was a testing week. That's different. Obviously, we give you the individual guidelines on that. So essentially, RPE 8 is tough. It really is. 2 to 3 reps away from failure. If I was to push myself on that to squats, I'm going to be very nearly taxed there, and you will definitely see a physical change from that. So most of you on the program, we want you to work to an RPE 8. That's going to allow you to, leave 2 or 3 reps in the tank, and it's going to allow you to do 3 to 4 to 5 sets, whatever the program rep ranges and the set structure is. Because if you were to go to failure on the first set, you'd have no more gas left in the tank to do the proceeding, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth set, whatever it is. So that's the best way to think about it. It's not productive to go to failure. Don't get too hung up on the numbers though. Like, honestly, just judge your each set and just be totally honest with yourself when you sit back up from the bench press or walk away from the squat bar, walk away from the deadlift bar. Think, was that set actually challenging? Was it actually uncomfortable? Could I have got 4 or 5 more reps there? If you could, you're probably only working to an RPE 6 or 7 and you're not pushing yourself hard enough there. And it's something that I have to even check myself with, 12 or 13 years into training. Like, sometimes I find myself not pushing quite as hard, and often this can really be the key determining factor in seeing a physical change, especially for the more experienced individuals we've got on the program. which I'll get onto in a second. But just check yourself after every single set and make sure that you really are pushing yourself, because that's what's going to force that physical change. Managing training intensity. So obviously we want to be pushing intensity, we want to be lifting heavier weights, doing more reps, but always make sure to maintain your form and tempo at all times. That is essential. We don't want to be sacrificing form and tempo at the expense we don't want to be pushing for intensity at the expense of form and tempo. So because it's the good quality form that will actually lead to a physical response. It's going to help you avoid injury as well, and maintaining that slow tempo, that slow eccentric portion of the rep is actually where the muscle is broken down and then therefore where it is built back up. So it's essential that even as you do get more experience and you start training at a higher intensity, you maintain the form at all times and the tempo as well. Now, obviously, we encourage you to send us videos over within TrueCoach so that we can review your form and technique. That's not just for the form to make sure you're doing it safely and effectively, but it's also for us to review your intensity, because I think there's a lot of people in the program, as I say, that maybe they haven't worked with a personal trainer in the past and they don't quite understand how hard they should be pushing themselves. So always send videos over for us to review, not just for the form, but also for the intensity as well. So as the intensity increases and you start to lift more, as you become more experienced, you're lifting heavier weights in the gym, you move through the different blocks of training, you accumulate more experience, the recovery that's required to actually recover from that intensity in those hard training sessions, it will become increased, if that makes sense. So a good way to think about it is like the individual that is deadlifting 30 kg for 10 reps is not going to need as much time to recover in between sets and in between training sessions as someone who is deadlifting 140 kg for 10 reps. Your central nervous system is going to take more of a hit. Now we do need to take that with a pinch of salt, because as an athlete progresses and they get stronger, they will generally get fitter as well. Their body will adapt. So as your intensity increases, you will generally become a fitter person. Your ability to withstand intensity will increase as well. But nonetheless, like a powerlifter is going to take longer to recover between his training sessions than a beginner in the gym. It's as simple as that. But your body should adapt and you should gain fitness as well. For a lot of you on the program as well, you are doing consistent aerobic and endurance work, which is obviously going to help your recovery between your training sessions and sets as well, because essentially you're just becoming a fitter individual. That's a big change that I noticed with my strength training. Once I started incorporating more running, I was not only out of breath, as much out of breath in between sets of high rep sets of squats and deadlifts, but also in between the training sessions as well. I found my recovery was better just because I had a much stronger aerobic base. And that's something we always talk about. If you are doing consistent endurance work, you're just going to become a more fitter and efficient individual, and your ability to recover will be better. But on top of that, obviously just make sure to stay on point with your recovery and sleep and nutrition and things like that as well. Training intensity becomes more important the more experience you accumulate. So what I mean by that is, if you're a beginner to the gym and you're going in, you're actually, controlling your nutrition, focusing on eating enough food and enough proteins to support your training, and you're actually just going in there and lifting a little bit heavier each week, even if you weren't pushing to an RP 7 or an 8, you're going to adapt to that change. You're going to build muscle just because it's a novel stimulus on the body. It's quite easy to progress. A lot of people refer to it as newbie gains. Like most people will build not the majority, but a large amount of muscle mass in the first 2 to 3 years of training. But the more experience you get, the harder it is to progress. So training intensity becomes even more important. Like for me, if I wanted to put on a significant amount of muscle mass now, not only would I need to be eating a lot more food and putting myself in a calorie surplus, I'd have to be training at an incredibly high intensity. So as you become more experienced, your progress, I'm not going to say it's going to slow down, but it's going to be harder to see as much progress or the rate of progress. But obviously we'll guide you on that as well. Obviously, everything I'm talking about here in terms of training intensity is in an ideal world on a good week. There may be periods of time where you do need to pull back on training intensity. So these are just some examples, and I'll go into a little bit of depth on each of them. So illness, I would always judge this and use common sense. And obviously you're working with either me or one of the other coaches on the program. So if you are ill and you're unsure if to train or not, like if it's going to make you worse, like actually going and doing that training session is going to make you worse and hold you back, I'd probably just avoid going to the gym in the first place. If you've just got a little bit of a cough or a light flu, you can go to the gym, you can pull back your intensity, you can work at maybe a lower rep range, further away from failure with some lighter weights, and you can leave the gym not feeling any worse, then I probably recommend training just simply to keep the flow and the kind of structure of your training program going. A high stress work period, so that's potentially correlated with less sleep. So if you know you're going into, for example, a busy season, a lot of the accountants mentioned that period of 2 to 4 weeks of where it's going to be incredibly tough and you are going to be a little bit sleep deprived, then maybe you need to consider reducing the intensity for that block of training. You're certainly not going to lose any progress, it's just going to be a period of maintenance, but I would definitely recommend communicating with us and getting our advice on that. It's obviously individual and context dependent. A deload, so a deload is essentially where you still do your training but you pull back on the intensity. Now there's various reasons for this. Some coaches and coaching programs will like to put in a deload week of training. It's like a lighter week of training every X amount of weeks. We don't do that. We just prefer to, because we are coaching everyone one-to-one, to communicate with everyone on the program. And we can usually tell when a client is due a deload. Motivation might suffer. They might be struggling to progressively overload in the gym. They're just lacking a bit of kind of drive there. And we'd usually recommend a deload there. So in that, within a deload week, you would really pull back on the intensity. You'd probably just be working, with 60% of the weight that you had usually been when you were fresh in that block of training. And in a race prep, so this is kind of relevant to me right now, I've got a half marathon race this Sunday. It's Wednesday now, so I've really pulled back on my intensity in the gym this week, specifically on lower body training, also just not lifting as heavy so that I can actually recover and perform well on the weekend. But obviously we would give you the guidance on what to do on a race week. We've got other clients doing that race on Sunday with me, so we'll pull back everyone's intensity there, and in some cases we'll actually remove training sessions. So again, that's individual dependent. So if you've got any questions about this, obviously just ask either myself or the other coaches on the program. But training intensity is incredibly important and it should not be overlooked, because as the more experience you get, the more important it becomes. And if you're not quite seeing the physical change that you would like, and you are genuinely following all the nutritional guidelines that we've given you, I would question your intensity. I would question the intensity that you're training at in the gym. But obviously just send us the videos over and we'll review those for you. Cheers.